Good morning.
Good morning.
We want to thank Ms. Susan Stone for our previous presentation and informative information she gave us on Reginald Carter. Today I'm going to be talking on Module 5, starting on page 62 in your participants manual. Measuring performance and establishing standards. Today we will be discussing, along with a few activities, how to measure performance and establishing standards. Our learning objectives for today, we're going to understand how to use the data from Carter's questions to identify performance and accountability, learn to identify how to calculate success in 2 ways, learn what baseball teaches us about measuring performance, identify industry standards for performance, identify measurement tools and processes, and practice matching outcome and indicators to measurement tools and processes. In this module, we're going to be moving further into accountability. We're going to be talking about success and how does a community action agent know it is successful. As we talk through this module, we'll be thinking about how to identify what success means to us, considering how to identify our success rate, which will help an agency to better answer the question. Carter's questions that we've already identified with Ms. Stone's on Carter's questions 1, 2, 3, and 6. And so in this Module 5, we'll be talking about questions 1, 3, and 6 as a basis for calculating performances and establishing accountability measures. Question 1 is, how many clients are we serving? What services do we give them? And then 6, what happens to the clients as a result of the service? Remember that our primary characteristic of outcome is that it represents a benefit or a change. In this module, we will consider the rate of change that we are accomplishing. On the bottom of page 62, I'll read, the next addition in this logic model is the calculation that will produce a measured performance. As we see in the creation of the indicator that we're going to be looking at here today, we establish a relationship between the number of clients that we're seeing and then how many actually receive the service. And so we're going to be further calculating the percentage, which will give us our actual results of what we've done. Turn to page 63, please. Performance is a percentage, also known as a rate, that we use to measure performance, that represents the relationship between those receiving service and those achieving an outcome. This determines the extent to which an outcome is achieved. I'm going to ask for some readers, and on page 63, starting with Ms. White, if you'll read the first 3 in the first box, starting with there are 5, and then Ms. Valerie, if you'll read number 4 and 5.
Okay, number 1, identify the outcomes. This is quantity statement about what is going to be achieved with no numbers. Carter question 6. Number 2, identify the service, activity, inventions, or output that is expected to produce the outcome. Carter question 3. Number 3, identify the number of people receiving the service. Carter question 1. Identify a time frame as a part of the description of the service.
Okay, thank you, Ms. White. Before you start, Ms. Val, if we notice on Carter question, on number 1, we're going to answer the question, what happens to the customer as a result of the service? Which is identifying the outcome. And then on number 2, identify the service. What service did we give them? And number 3, identify the number of people achieving, which is question number 1, how many did we serve? Ms. Val, if you will read 4 and 5, please.
4, identify
identify the outcome indicators. This is the qualitative statement for the number of clients or units that are expected to achieve the outcome is to add to the general outcome statement. Estimate performance by calculating the relationship between the number receiving the service and the number achieving the outcome. Divide the numbers expected to achieve the outcome placed in the numerator of the factor you are creating by the number expected to receive the services placed in the domain numerator of the fraction to get a percent. This calculation yields a percentage, which is the projected success rate.
Thank you. And if we look at questions 1 through 5, and then it says there are 5 steps used. So question 1 through 5 are steps that we use for the expected performance. And then when we go down to question 6, but then these other notes on here said these steps occur prior to delivery of service. And then the final step, which is 6, occurs after the service. So number 6 says the actual performance is calculated. 6 determines what we actually did. And then the analysis of the performance will include comparing the projected success rate percentage with the actual success rate percentage. And then on here, we will put the R, which is our results. You do it in a lower, if you don't have your actual results yet, and right here, now we're gonna put it in the lower, and then as we get our results, then we'll move it up. So the lower is just letting us know at this time we don't actually have our results. Let's turn to page 64, please. Participants manual. Estimating performance. A family self-sufficiency program has enrolled 20 families who will receive case management service over the next 6 months. It is estimated or projected that 7 of the families will increase their household income as a result of various activities coordinated by the case manager. 1, outcome, increased household income. 2, service activity. The case managed family self-sufficiency program. Number 3, the number to be served, which is 20 from the paragraph, families in a 6-month period. The outcome indicator, which is your numerator, is 7 families will increase household income by 10% in 6 months. And then the projected success rate is 7 families who will achieve the outcome divided by the 20 families receiving the service equals 35%. So we're gonna look at that here. Let's see if we can- Our estimated performance, we had 20 families, which is our denominator. So we had 7 families to actually complete who increased their household income. So on that, which is the estimated performance, we had 35% of the families that we had projected to actually increase their household income. Then we go to measuring actual performance. So remember, that's the estimated. So actual performance is after the service has been provided, the program identified the actual number of clients who received the outcome within the established time frame, which was 6 months, and calculate the success rate. This requires follow-up. This number was 5 families. 5 families achieved the outcome divided by the 20 families of service, which is actually 25%. So what happens is when you do your actual performance, you still have your 20 that was enrolled, even though 5 actually completed. See, remember, this was an estimate. We estimated that 7 would, but then we came down to the actual completion. Only 5 actually completed the program. See, which made our percentage rate less. See, here when we did the estimate, we had a high percentage rate, but then when we came to the actual one, our percentage rate actually reduced to 25%. Let's turn to page 60, 66, 65? 5, please. The question is raised, when does a client become a client? It is an important place of discussion of performance. If you project service for 20 families, but actually served 15, it will affect your performance calculation. If you provide service to 20 and 5 dropped out, you will use the number served, which is 20. We don't change it just because there was 15. So we will leave that as 20 as our denominator. So the answer to the question that is when a client becomes a client is it depends on what we're counting. So if we're counting actuals, yes, it would change to 15. But since we're doing the actual performance of what we expected and how many we actually had enrolled, we would keep the 20. So our actual performance, when we're going to talk about the reduced denominator, which we did, which was the 15, when we talked about the actual performance, remember we said only 15 completed. We had enrolled 20, but then only 15 completed, along with the 5 that completed. We do the reduced denominator, which actually takes our percentage up. It's all about making your numbers look better, you know. So it like I said, it depends on what you're counting and what you want to be seen. So which fraction is better, the 15 out of 20, or the 5 out of 15? I mean, the 5 out of 20 or the 5 out of 15?
5 out of 15.
Well, neither. It depends on what you're counting. So it actually depends on what you're counting. So, you know, if you're counting one thing, it's gonna be this, but then if you're counting something else. So neither one of them is better, it's just based on what you're counting. Because each one of them measured 2 different things. See, remember, one was actually measuring enrolled, and the other was actually measuring completed. So that's why neither is better, because they measure 2 different things. All right, let's go to page 66, please. And here we're gonna do the activity, our projected rate of success. And like I alluded to earlier, Ms. Stone had did the outcome indicator, which she completed the number of customers who achieved out of the 25, 10 completed, which is actually what percentage. So what we would have here, so we're doing the percentage rate. So if we say 10 out of 25 or 40%, will achieve the money management training within 6 months. So all the thing we do in this part, we add a percentage rate of how many will actually complete the projected training. Okay, let's go to page 67. And we're gonna talk about baseball. You're gonna receive baseball cards, and on the cards, we're gonna focus on the batting average. I'm gonna break everybody into groups. I've got them circled on this. And we're looking at the batting average. And we're looking at the actual batting averages on the card, not the number of pitches. It's gonna say average, AVG. So what does it mean to bat 1,000?
That's the top.
What does it mean to bat 1,000?
Excellent.
You get a hit every time you go to bat.
That's right, it means you bat perfect. So in baseball, when they collect statistic, before 1876, they started to keep track of the hitters 1,000 times at bat. If everyone bats 1,000 times, that means they got a hit every single time. They were up to bat in 1,000 tries. So getting a hit, when we talk about getting a hit, that means they're getting on base every time that they hit the ball. How often do you think a professional baseball player come close to hitting 1,000 times? Never. Right, never. So in baseball, if you look at the average, below average is 250.250 or below. And average is 0.25 to 0.299, they're average batters. And 0.300, they're considered above average or excellent. So what I want you to do, we're gonna look at this. And I want you to call out. We're gonna start with, Ms. Story. We're gonna start out with, what number do you have on your card?
You mean the average?
Yes, ma'am, the batting average.
100. Mine is 100.
She's got 100, okay? Okay. Just keep going around the room. Ms. Lewis, what you have?
276.
Okay.
282.
282?
Okay, 0.274. 317.
0.232.
0.232?
Yes.
Okay.
0.300.
0.230. 328.
Okay. Okay, remember that I said from 250 to 300 was excellent. I'm sorry, not 250. 299. This is average from 250 to 290 is average, and then 250 with 249 below is below average. So I'm gonna write each one of that there. It's gonna be above average. Or excellent. And this one is average. So what we're gonna do here, we're gonna find a percentage. So remember, anything above 300 is gonna be an excellent batter. So if we're gonna pull right here, 328. So if you got 328, this is the number of times they got on base. So then if you do 1,000 times at bat, and he did 328, that's gonna equal what percent? 32.8%. He's an excellent batter at 32.8. Baseball measures differently from the way we measure. If we looked at us and say we only made 32%, we look bad. You know, an agency look bad. So it's actually dependent on what they're measuring. Baseball has done this over the years. So if we come here and we say 282, so we do 282 over what?
1,000.
And what you're doing, you're dividing the top number by the denominator, you're dividing your numerator, and you come out with your average, which is how many percent?
28.2.
22.
So they're average batter. So then you come down here, he got here, what? 100 times out of 1,000? Not real good, is it? So he got on base by what? 10% of the time, which is below average. They won't keep him on their team real long. Give him a bench or they'll trade him out. Let's look at page 68, and we're gonna look at the example we have here in the book. Yogi Berra. Mr. Johnson, if you'll read that first paragraph.
In baseball,
Yes, sir, in baseball.
while we collect the number of times a player is at bat, attendance or participation, what baseball wants to know is the results of being at bat. Did the player officially get up to bat and get a hit? This result or outcome indicators performance calculation called batting average.
Thank you. And if you look right here in the middle of the page, this is his baseball card for him. So he was at bat 584 times. And out of 584 times during that season, he got 179 hits. So his batting average was so he's a superstar. He's considered a superstar because of the number of times he actually got on base. So they consider him successful because he hit the ball, got on base 30.7% of the time. So what baseball has taught us that 30% was highly successful, or is highly successful, because they still use that same measurement today. They found something that worked, they've tried it over the years with changing bats, changing balls, but they still came out with the same way to measure how you consider someone successful as a baseball player. So they've tried theirs and measured it over the years, ever since 1876. So nothing has changed. So the way they measure that is successful with them. So thank you for that activity. And if you all just pass the cards down to the end of the table, and I'll collect them. We're gonna go to page 69. So back, going to what I was saying, in the middle of the page, what did baseball do that we don't? They clearly define the performance indicators, hit and get on base related to the outcome, winning the game. So that's the ultimate goal of the game, is to win. And they can't win if they don't get on base. So observe the performance, they observe performance and keep record. What happened? They analyze the data, they develop a benchmark of excellence based on what they analyzed, and then they publicize what they've learned so that the public knows that 30% is excellent. Let's go to page 70. I've got some activity sheets I'm gonna pass out. Just take one and pass it down, please. And then just hang on to the extras for me. Thank you. And the same groups that we initially broke into, I want you to get into them. We're gonna do this in, just 1 minute. I want you to do the first two, and then then I'll go over the rest with you. So just do the first two. And we don't have to do them in groups, we can do them individually, because we're just gonna do the first two of that, of this activity. And this is an activity that we measure in the industry. It's the same thing in your books, but you know, we ask you not to write in the books. Thank you. Oh, the answer's not in the book. No, the answer's not in the book. Not for that, not to looking up, not looking it up to find, you know, like where you read it. These are just some general things that, you know, they come up with activities, how you measure in the public setting and nonprofit sectors. So yeah, so do the first two.
You just make those up?
Yeah. You're just trying to guess what they would say.
It's just like recruitment placement for a job.
Just,
Recruitment placement, like you recruit somebody for a job or something.
okay, it says executive management recruitment percentage.
Placement rate.
Uh-huh, yes, ma'am. So out of executive management recruitment, how many, what percentage you think actually placed? Right. Yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am. Yes. One more minute. I'm just asking you to do the first two, so one more minute. 10 seconds. All right, here we go. The first one. 20%. Placement. Or at 20. All right, okay. New magazines, 3.3%. Survive over 12 months. 3.3%. Okay, the next one, movies, 1 in 6 or 16.7% make a profit. Broadway, 1 in 7 or 14.3 make a profit. Music recording, CDs, 5% make a profit. Prescription drugs, 20% make it to the market. Of the prescription drugs that make it to the market, 33 make a profit, 33%.
I can't believe that.
Pfizer, 1 in 100 new drugs, or 1% to make it to market, 10 to 12 years, they take 10 to 12 years to develop that product. Only 1% make it. DuPont, 1 in 250 or 0.004% of ideas generate one marketable new product. On-time railroad delivery, plus or minus 24 hours. So if you're gonna take the train, you just be ready to be late 24 hours or they're gonna leave you. And then baseball, 1 hit in 3 times at bat is a superstar. 1 hit in 4 times at bat is still a successful hitter. So community action must establish its own standards of performance and communicate these standards of performance to elected officials, government, public and private funders, general public, the media, and the staff of CAA and the CSBG eligible entities. Page 71. I hope you all enjoyed that activity. And you know, even in, one thing I did forget to bring out, that even in these moderate, on the activity of success, even in these, in the industry, they consider it okay because although they're low, they're making money. So even though those percentages are low, because those are actual percentages, even though they're low, they don't worry about that because they are still, it's about profit for them. So like I said, everything based on what you're actually measuring. So they're measuring dollars. So these things, the reason, although they're small, it still equal dollars to them. None of them were zeros. On page 71, and we're talking about performance targeting for NPIs. Outcome reporting using national indicators of community action performance, NPIs, became mandatory activity for services delivered after July of 2005. NPIs are about performance. They identify success, like we just discussed, using a calculation based on numbers served and numbers achieving results. The ability of an agency to know how many outcomes they produce. So, you know, that's what it's all, you know, it's all about, knowing what we're able to produce, you know, at the end of the day. The examples in the box refer to the original NPIs on page 71. So here we have the original NPIs, which when reporting NPIs, CAAs are asked to project the number to be served, the number to achieve an outcome in the three areas. NPI indicator 1, employment, 1.3, economic assessment and enhancement and utilization, and NPI number 6.3, child and family development. Ms. Craig, would you read under the box that paragraph for me in this performance?
In this performance calculation, you will be comparing the number of targeted or projected outcomes, which becomes the denominator with the actual number who achieved those outcomes, which becomes the numerator. The calculation does not use the number of those receiving services. Keep going.
No, that's good. So as we, you know, she said the calculation does not use the number of those receiving services. Let's turn over to page 72 and we're gonna look at that a little more. We're gonna refer back to the chart here. And remember, we talked about the estimated, and we talked about the actual, and then we talked about the actual performance with a reduced denominator. And so now we're gonna talk about another dimension of it, which is our reduced denominator and numerator. On page 72, in the example used previously, we projected that 7 out of 20 families receiving case management service will achieve the expected outcome. That was our projection. This is the number projected or target and becomes a denominator of the fraction you are creating to establish the performance rate. When the program was completed, we found that 5 families actually completed the outcome. This actual number became the numerator of the fraction. So we came here, we found out that 5 actually out of the 25 enrolled. The ability to successfully project your performance for this project is 71%. So we're gonna go here with the reduced numerator and the reduced denominator. Because remember, 7 was our estimate. So we reduced the denominator to 7, and then 5, which was actually what completed. And so that's 5 here, and so that equals to 71%. So as you go around and you look at the board, when we made the estimate, the actual, and then the performance with the reduced denominator, we come all the way back around to another dimension of it, which is reducing the denominator and the numerator, which gives us, our projected outcome. So, 5 families increased income by 10%, which is the actual, and then the 7, like I said, was the target, which gave us that 71% success rate. Page 73, please. Establishing measurement tools and processes. Measurement tools are the documents that prove your output and outcomes. And if we look at page, remember output, measurement tools, document the service and process provided by the agency or done by the customer, and the outcome measures the tool, measurement tool documents the change that has happened. So intake forms would document how many people were enrolled, which was to be the output, and then the pre would document the change in skills or knowledge, which would be the outcome. Remember we had that yesterday, or we're in the earlier session. And if we look at it in the box on page 73, here are a few shortcuts to help us minimize the use of soft outcomes. And if we look at the bottom, it gives us some examples of soft outcomes: achievement of self-esteem or self-confidence. You know, these are things that's really not measurable. You can't, they're really hard to measure. That's when they talk about the soft outcomes. And then use a measurement tool to capture outcomes. Use a pre-existing measuring tool before creating one, and research other organizations that may have outcome framework before you create. So basically use what somebody else is using. Don't go and try, if somebody else that already has one in place, you know, go and use what they're using instead of trying to go all the way back and recreate the wheel. And then you got some research organization on page 74 that may have outcome framework, you know, before creating your own, like the American Red Cross, Big Brothers and Sisters, Boys and Girls Club, you know, things like that. On page 75, we're gonna talk about what are our results, which is question talked about with Drucker. He raised the importance of the qualitative and quantitative measures. Qualitative results can be in the realm of intangible. Qualitative data also sometimes are more subjected to a difficult to grasp and are just as real and just as important as, and can be gathered just as systematically as quantitative. Quantitative measures are essentially for assessing whether resources are properly concentrated for results, whether progress is being made, whether lives and communities are changing for the better. These measures require that we have defined standards. Page 76. So page 76 talks about, and it's an activity on our measurement tools and processes. And here we're going to talk about the measurement tool, the data sources, and then the frequency. So our measurement tools are what we use, and it says what measurement tool is used to document your results. So if you were measuring something, what kind of tools would you use to measure the results that you're trying to achieve? So our need here is Family Likes Affordable Housing. So what measurement tools that would we use to measure that? So let me give you an example. So if we do utility bills, so a measurement tools that we use to, or if you're doing utility bills, that they need assistance with that bill, then they have what? A bill. So that's a measurement tool. So now, in Families Like Affordable Housing, what measurement tools could we use? Bank account, I give you, employment record,
A lease,
financial report. So those are your mortgage document, so the receipt, rent, lease. So those are some measurement tools that we would need to obtain for the, need for this customer. So then our data source is who would be responsible for collecting it? The case manager. The case manager. And then how would the data be collected?
Get it from the customer.
Right.
Of the blind.
And then also, other data sources would be our database, your agency's database, case notes. That's the data source, and then personnel would be, you know, like you said, staff, other partners' reports. So, you know, we, you know, sometimes you have to contact the, utility company, so sometimes you contact the landlord or the mortgage company to find out if they actually staying in the homes, you know. And then, other procedures would be home visits and things like that. And then what is the frequency of the data collection reporting? How often is the data collected?
6 months.
So 6 months, because we're giving them 6 months, that we're saying that in this time, they're gonna achieve, the outcome that they have received affordable housing. So 6 months, we're gonna follow up on, and then we're saying how often the data is collected, and how often is it reported? Well, we do it 6 months, because that's what we're saying is the 6 months. And so, you know, every 6 months, it would need to be reported, so, so since we said they're gonna do it in 6 months, so we have to follow up, and that's where our follow-up comes in. We follow up with them to make sure that the measurement tools that we measured it by, that they still employed, and, you know, and then they're still, having in the homes, you know, that, you know, then in our report, we report that in 6 months, the customer still maintained affordable housing. So we didn't help them obtain it, so we did there, but now in the follow-up, they maintained affordable housing. And so on our logic model, we will complete it with the M. And see, then our results was that they did receive affordable housing. So we're gonna move it up. And then this is our data and the frequency. So our key points, this module provides a definition of success using outcome and indicators. We showed how the 3 Carter questions came in and can be used as a foundation of accountability, which is 1, 3, and 6 that we use in this module. And then we're sure focus on both the output and outcomes, as they both are important to measure. We introduced the concept of performance targets and actual performance, actual accomplishments. And we provided a formula for identifying an agent's ability to target or project their success, and identify the measurement tools and processes. Thank you.